Hello, what's up everyone? Welcome to this new live stream where we are going to explore and discover TipKit together. So what's TipKit? TipKit is a new framework that will be part of iOS 17 and that was announced during WWDC in June, so 2 months ago. However, unlike many new features of iOS 17, TipKit wasn't available in the initial betas of Xcode 15. I think it became available with beta 4, if I remember it correctly. And so right now I'm running Xcode 15 beta 5, and we're going to use it to discover this new framework. So I'm pretty excited about this live stream because during WWDC week I had already done two live stream in the format Let's Explore and Discover. I did one with Swift Data and one with Swift Macros, and I had really enjoyed this format of discovering new features together and trying to make sense of them. And when I look at also the views analytics, the number of people who watched the live streams, the replays are doing very well, which is a sign that it's a topic that you're enjoying as an audience. So I'm glad that I found this format that I like and that you like also. And so let's go ahead and explore TipKit together. So you will find in the description of the live stream a link to the documentation on Apple's website. And if you are watching the replay, you will also find a link with the code I will have made during this live stream. But first, let's start and open the documentation. So the link I've put normally should show you this web page. And by the way, if you are watching live, don't forget that the greatest feature of a live stream is that we are together, and so we can discuss together. You have a chat, so any question or remark that you have, please let me know. And I always do my best to try and just give you the best answer I can. Hello, Cristiano. Nice to see you in the chat. So this is the web page, and you can see what TipKit is about. You use TipKit to show contextual tips that highlight new, interesting, or unused features people haven't discovered on their own yet. And I don't know about you, but for me, I was a bit surprised to see Apple announce a first-party framework for this kind of contextual hints, because for a long time, there was kind of this idea that a good UI should be self-explanatory, and that basically, if you needed to display this kind of tips in your app, maybe it was a sign that something was not doing that great with your UI. And now it seems Apple has changed their stance a bit because they are making a first-party framework to implement these tips. Having such a framework is great because if you've ever need to implement this kind of little hints that are displayed above the UI, overlaid above the UI and pointing towards an element in the UI, you might have noticed that it's not as easy as it might seem, especially because you need to take into account different device sizes and screen sizes, and so it can actually be quite challenging. So having a first party framework to implement this is great. And even if you have a UI that is doing pretty well, it can happen that you have put a new feature in your app and you would like to highlight this new feature. And so I'm sure that even apps with great UI that people are accustomed to will find a use case to use TipKit. And from what I understand, TipKit is supposed to work both with Swift UI and also UIKit. So I will be excited to see the two approaches. So you define your tip content and the conditions under which they appear with the tip protocol, then draw attention to new features using the tip view. And I saw that they said so apparently it's more in macOS. So actually, if you have installed macOS, I think it's Savannah, the next one, macOS 14, the beta, it won't build in the simulator, but lucky for me, I'm still on the previous version, the current version, so I'm able to build in the simulator, and I tested it before starting the live stream. So as you design tips for your app, you ensure you don't overwhelm your users. Use tips sparingly to highlight non-obvious features people haven't discovered on their own. And I think sparingly and non-obvious features are the important words here. Similarly, avoid displaying tips each time someone uses your app. Tips can become distracting when they appear unnecessarily. Don't use tips to guide people through your app or for advertising and promotion purposes. Yeah, because it could become an anti-pattern, like you highlight the button to pay for the subscription, for instance. Not sure Apple is going to be a big fan of that. And so we have this sample code to get us started. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna copy this code. So let me just copy it like that. Okay. And then I'm gonna go back to Xcode, create my new project, and we're gonna start using the sample code. So let's create a project. I'm gonna call it Discovering TipKit. Interface SwiftUI, no storage, no test, not needed. We can move on. Just gonna put it on my desktop. So it's gonna create your typical SwiftUI project. Of course, since we are in iOS in Xcode 15, you can see we have the new syntax for the preview that uses the macro #preview. But besides that, it's pretty familiar territory. But I'm going to replace the code with what I got from Apple's documentation. Okay, there was also this app which was there. So actually this I need to move to the app right here. Okay, I need to fix a few missing statements. I'm gonna rename it Discovering TipKit app. It's gonna be better. Okay. So here I have my tip. So actually there is no content view. Like they define everything inside the body of the app. So here this is more like of a model. So I'm just going to rename this file, and here also. Okay, so let's see. Oh yes, cannot find tip view because I need to import, of course, TipKit like that. Okay, seems we are doing pretty well. Let's see. The project builds, which is great. So let's see what we have. So we have this favorite landmark tip, which implements the tip protocol. And you can see we provide a title, a message, and an asset. So let's take a look at the protocol to see what's inside of it. So we have an ID. Okay. Otherwise, it's going to be the name of the type. Okay, so I guess it's if you want to have several tips of the same type. Then the title, which is a text. So a text, one of SwiftUI's basic views. A message, which is an optional text. So you might not have a message, but you need to have a title. Same thing for the asset, which is an image. And then you can have some actions with an action builder. So just like a view builder, you can put some actions together, and then action builder will take care of building them into like some kind of collection. Rules. So I guess rules to display, to know when to display the tip, and then options. Okay, so it's gonna be a few things we're going to be able to explore together, and then we can see other things like status, should display, status update. Okay, let's take a look. So this is our tip. And then, so here we have the instance of the tip right here. We have a VStack, our tip view, and they say place the tip view near the feature you want to highlight. So that's one of the things that kind of like surprised me when I saw the code, because when you think about like a feature like TipKit, which allows you to highlight specific UI elements, you would imagine that you would place it, you would use it as a modifier. For instance, you would say, okay, like image, and then have a modifier like tip, for instance. And actually, it seems you can do it also. So we will see if there is a difference between the two, but we have this tip modifier, and then we have this tip view. So we put it here, arrow edge bottom, so it means that we want to display from the bottom of this view just below. And then what's interesting is that here, so when the view appears, we have this task, which is going to call tips.configure, and so we give some configuration rules, I guess. So it's it's a tip configuration, and we say display frequency immediate, data store location, application default. So let's see what the app looks like when I launch it, and then we can like start exploring everything and see with more details what each of these things do. So I'm launching the app in the simulator, so an iOS 17 simulator, and you can see we have the tip that has appeared. So it's quite big actually, but we can see the title, the message, and the asset. And we can close it either by the little cross, but maybe also if I don't know if I touch somewhere else, no. So I need to close it like that. And also the element has moved, so it hasn't really like overlaid. It was really like taking some room in the view hierarchy. So let's see, for instance, you know what I want to experiment. I want to do a pop over tip. And so here I'm going to provide, so my tip is going to be this favorite landmark tip. Arrow is going to be bottom, and I won't provide any action like that. And so here, maybe I will just not provide a data store location. I would like the tip to be displayed every time. Uh-huh. But maybe because it was already application default. Okay, it's a data store location. I'm trying to see if maybe I could like say, you know, like oh, there is this thing like should reset. Should reset. Let's put it to true so that it resets every time, which is nice when you are like in dev mode. Okay. Even the should reset maybe doesn't do anything. So you know what? Let me try and remove the app from the simulator just to see, because it might also be that this code here is not working and it's hard to tell which. Okay, so it could be that this code is not working. So if it's not working, we will try and understand why later. But let's see. If I just have my tip view, okay, so it's working. And now that I've called should reset with true as its argument, you can see that it's appearing every time. Okay, so it's the popover tip that doesn't work as I expected. Okay, let's see tip view if we go take a look at it. So we can see it's iOS 17. So it takes some content and we give it some content to display, and the content should be okay, it should be a tip. It's written here, that makes sense. Then there is a notion of style. We can see we have mini tip. So let's see. Let's try and make the style vary, for instance. So if I say maybe it's like style. How do I set the tip style? Because here I have I have it, mini tip here. Okay. Trying to see where I set my tip style. When will the final version of Xcode be released? Usually the release candidate is released a few days before the new version of iOS. Like last year, iOS 16 was released. It was released in mid-September. I think it was on a Monday. I think it was the Monday of the keynote. Actually, I'm not sure, but I think it was the Monday of the keynote. And Xcode release candidate was released the Thursday before, but at the very end of the day. Because I still remember I spent my entire Friday making sure that the app I work on had its release submitted to the App Store with the release candidate, with the iOS 16 feature we had been working on. So right after the iPhone keynote, I mean, it used to be after the iPhone keynote, but last year it was a bit before. But it kind of depends on when iOS is released, because they need to release the release candidate a few days before iOS so that app developers can submit their apps with the new features, because Apple very often plans to highlight apps that have adopted a new feature of iOS. So they need to give this little little room for developers to submit their apps. Okay, I wanted to see like there was the tip asset size, but it's okay. It's just a frame. Um, all right. You know what? I'm just going to type tip and see what's suggested. So we have tip view, tip UI view. I'm wondering if it's for UI kit actually. You know what? Let me see. So if I look at tip UI view, yes, it's the UI view version of it. Okay, it's interesting because I'm sure you've also had this problem at some point, like when you have a view that is, I mean, when you have both SwiftUI and UIKit in your app, and you have a view that exists in both worlds, how do you name it? Because you cannot give it the same name. So here they went with UI for the UIKit version. That's an interesting naming convention, but it makes sense because it's a UI view, which is the name of the superclass in UIKit, and here it's a view, which is the name of the protocol in SwiftUI. So in a way, that makes sense. I might take inspiration from that. Okay, let's try and make a view that is a bit more complex. I was wondering if I shouldn't get the code, maybe a bit later, but get the code from my like the app I made in the SwiftUI training course that displays like a list of movies. But for now, I'm just going to display a button that says like click me, for instance. The action will just do like nothing. And let's see what's gonna happen. So when I launch the app again, we can see that it's still appearing on the image. But now if I take the tip and I move it like here, now what happens? Okay, so you want to put the tip view before the view that it will appear on. When they say near, actually, it's more like before the view you want to highlight, because now it's highlighting the button. However, what's interesting is this arrow edge. So arrow edge actually is the edge of the arrow on the tip, and not the edge of the, it's because it's the top edge of the button. So if I put now top, oh, okay, so that's interesting actually. So the near is kind of correct because it depends on, you see, if I say arrow top, then it's going to take the element that is above. And now it's this one. So it's, yeah, that's kind of confusing as an API design choice, because you see, if I say arrow edge is top, then my tip view is going to refer to the image. But if I say it's bottom, now my tip view refers to the button below. That's a very interesting design decision. I would be super curious to know what motivated it, because when I see it like that, it seems like something that kind of has, like the potential to get people quite confused. To be honest, because I mean, it's the code won't have the same effect depending on the value of this argument, which is kind of weird in a way. That's why I would have. I mean, if you had asked me to design this API, I would have done like a modifier that you apply to a view. So actually, let's see this modifier like pop over tip. What does it do? Like if I give it the tip like that, we saw that it doesn't work, but oh, now it works. That's weird because when I tried it at the beginning of the live. I put it there, but I think I had given it also like the arrow edge. I had said bottom. Maybe that was the problem. Okay. And when I say top, now, when I say top, now it appears. Oh, maybe, or maybe, you know what? Maybe it's because when I say bottom, so maybe actually it's being displayed, but outside of the safe area. Ah, maybe that's the difference. I think I get the difference between tip and pop over tip. So have a look. Gonna put it like I'm trying to do a code that does the same thing, but a bit differently. So if I do it like that, what is it going to do? Oh, okay. So actually, oh, okay, I get it. Now I get it. When you create the tip view, okay, when you create the tip view and you put it in your VStack, the tip view is just a view in the VStack, and we think that it relates to the view above because there is this arrow pointing to the top, but actually you're not saying, like, there is no real link between the two views. It's just that visually we make the link, but they are two independent views. That's why it was I thought that if I change the value from top to bottom, it became attached to a new view, but actually it wasn't the case. It was just that there was a different, the view was drawn differently, but nothing changed in the underlying model. Okay, so when you do a tip view like that, it's just part of your view hierarchy, and you have this button to make it disappear. However, when you use the modifier pop over tip, now it's being displayed, and now it seems to relate to the view. Yes, and you can see that there is this animation when I close it. It appears from the view and it disappears into the view. And also, relaunching it again, you can see that we have some nice padding. Visually, it's a bit nicer. And if I just go back to the other code, here you can see it takes the whole screen, and I was like, initially, like, that's not super, super nice, but it's because it's just a view in the VStack. And I guess the tip view like tries to take as much horizontal space as available. Okay, so it's interesting that in their demo code, Apple, they show you the tip view just like this. Even though I guess most of the time you will want to use the modifier because it seems like much better to use the modifier than just to put like this view in the middle. Because let's imagine that I change my H tag by my V stack by an H tag. You can see that if I put it, and I would like it to be centered. So how do I center in an H tag? Oh, it's because of the spacer. Okay, so I'm just actually if I just get rid of the spacer, perfect. Okay, so here we have let's imagine this is like in the navigation bar, for instance. We have the tip that is working as we expect, and with the popover. But now if I just put like the tip like this, even if I say like leading, it's gonna look like shit. Yeah, you see, like it really doesn't look good. And when you remove it, there is no animation, it doesn't make sense. So I think most of the time you will probably not want to use the tip view directly. And using this right here, much better, much better API. Okay, so it's just that the doc is slightly misleading in terms of best practices. But when you see the feature like that, it's great, especially that there is this display frequency where you can say, okay, I want it displayed immediately, hourly, daily, monthly, weekly. That seems pretty great. So that's pretty cool. And so let's see, if I put another one on the button, let's see what's going to happen. So if I say pop over tip, I give the same one. What's gonna happen? Will it display the two of them at once? Oh, this time it showed that one. Okay, so it seems maybe the latest one. Yeah, it seems the latest one takes precedence. You cannot display two at once, and the latest one that you've defined takes precedence. Might be how it's supposed to behave. Might also be a bug because we're still on the beta of Xcode 15, so you never know. But that's an interesting behavior. Okay. And so there were other, no, I don't want to call it on the tip, but I wanted to see if there were other modifier. So if I do tip like that, so tip asset size, tip corner radius, tip background. We can change the background of the tip or the corner radius. So let's see, if I put a very big corner radius, what's gonna happen? It doesn't seem it, I'm not sure it did anything. I'm going to comment it out and to see. No, I think it was the same, but maybe I should call it like before I call the popover tip. I don't know. I'm not sure it did that much of a change. I'm gonna try also the background just to see if this one has an impact. Or maybe like you're supposed to call it on the tip view. I'm not sure. So if I call tip background like that, I could also say like color red, for instance. This way, if it works, it will be pretty clear like what's the side effect. So okay, we don't have the side effects for now. If I move it after the popover tip, doesn't work either. Let's go back to the doc to see. We also have these rules that I would like to test just after. Oh, okay. We also have like methods more for testing, so for in development, but you can show like all tips, show a tip, hide them. That's pretty cool. I still haven't figured out how to configure the tip style. All right. So let's try and have a look at the tip, for instance. So let's see. At the rules. So how can I create these? I think the rules you define them inside the tip. I think it was like yes, something like that. And so, what does a rule look like? Um, Trying to see if there is. Okay, so you have events actually. Trying to see if there is something here. So you have some kind of predicate, like a function that says whether or not you should display a tip. Then you have this rule builder, but I would like to build just a simple rule, but I'm not sure how I should like do it. Let me go back to the doc to see maybe there is like oh, it seems there is a macro actually to create a rule. So it's a macro. Let's see. We don't have much more in terms of example code, but let's see. So if I try to something like hashtag rule like that, so it looks like that. You have events and then a body. So something like that. But how do I get this tip event? Let's see how it looks like. I guess maybe it's like events that you create yourself and then you also like send. Oh, we could do that with the button. So let's see. If I want to create like my tip event, let's see if okay. I'm just gonna call it like custom tip event so it's clear that it's part of my project. So let's see, what do I need to implement? And also, do we need to implement other things? Okay, so it's identifiable, sendable, and there is an idea of donations. Okay. And the ID is a string. And you can init it with just an ID. So maybe actually I could just create it. So let's see. Like if here, now I think tip event is it's a struct. Okay, so actually it's just a struct. Okay. So I don't know, like if I try to create something like event, and for the ID it's going to be going to create a constant here. It will be like custom event ID. It's gonna be a string, and I'm gonna call it like my custom event. Actually, I don't need to specify the type explicitly. Okay, something like that. And so here, like, can I not just do something like return true? External macro implementation. The type must be public and provided. So maybe I don't have access to this, or maybe just actually like maybe the rule it's not available like outside of TipKit. You know what? Maybe I can just actually maybe it's just like maybe I just shouldn't use the macro and just create like a rule like that. Requires that bool conform to event predicate expression. I just do something like this. No, it doesn't work. What's an event predicate expression? So it's a predicate expression. Okay. Something that has an output. This one is honestly very hard to figure out without some code sample. They could have done a bit of a better job providing us with code samples, because maybe if I look here, maybe there is a few more things. No, here it's what they gave us already. But for the rules, so the rules determine when a tip is eligible for display. Let's see if I click here. Yeah, there is absolutely nothing. They don't tell you really like how to build. Oh, look at that. We've got it. Okay, we've got a code example. Okay. Yeah, this one is hard to figure out if you don't have an example. So it seems that I was doing kind of good with my constant, except that it's going to be did click button for my event. Okay, so at least that seems to make like sense. No, it's not happy. Cannot find event in scope. Maybe I need to do like tip.event and something like that. Okay, at least here it's happy. All right. And so, oh, okay, I get it. Okay, so I'm going to take this right here. So actually, before I could move this inside the struct, hence the static that they had made, which kind of they had put, which kind of makes sense. And so for the rules here, so I'm gonna take this code, and so they build a rule, they give the event. You know what? I'm just going to format the code. But it seems I cannot access the macro. But at least the idea is that, okay, you say you want to display the tip when there has been at least 3 donations of this event. And so what they call a donation is basically like the event has been triggered, the way I understand it. And so this way you see, okay, if it's the 4th time, then I want to display the tip, which is kind of nice, because maybe like, I don't know, like when you have an export screen, and once the user has exported maybe like 4 times using the basic export, maybe you want to draw the attention of the user to the fact that there is some more advanced options that they might want to learn about. So that's kind of useful. But the thing is, we have this error like so I hope I will be able to figure this one out. And then for the okay, and this one is for a parameter. So it's like you have some state inside your app, and you're creating a rule based on that state. Okay. Now all I need is to make my my rule build right here. It's kind of frustrating that it doesn't build. I'm just going to go back to TipKit, because you see there was like this thing, but they said macro could not be found. So maybe this is, and there is a workaround that you need to set, and I had seen that. So maybe I will need to set it actually. So let's see. macro could not be found, and so you see you need to go to the Xcode project build settings, set other Swift flags to this thing right here. So let's do it. So Xcode project build settings, other Swift flags. So Xcode project build settings, other Swift flags. And so here I'm supposed to put the value they gave me. I'm building. Build succeeded. That's amazing. I'm so glad I saw this warning before, and I was like, oh no, like the project seems to build for me. But yeah, if you want to use the rule, okay. I'm so glad I've been able to solve this, and it didn't end like it didn't end up like, you know, like my Vision Pro live stream where the sample project just wouldn't build with the new Xcode beta, and I was like, okay, well, I guess this is game over because I cannot do anything if the project doesn't build. Okay, so now all we need to do is to actually donate the event when the user taps on the button. So let's see how we can do that. Gonna remove this code. Gonna remove this code also right here. Gonna remove this code also. This code also. Just cleaning up a bit so that it's easy to follow. And so, how do I donate an event? You know what? Let's go back to documentation because there were a few good examples. So maybe I should go and look towards tip.event. Maybe it's gonna be here. Okay. Use an event when you want to track an action that can occur one or more times in your app, such as user logging in. So if you already have analytics in your apps with events already set, it seems that yeah, you definitely want to piggyback on these existing events that you already have set. And as we've seen, like it's just you know, like what we did is that we took a constant, a string constant, and wrapped it into this wrapper object. So if you already have like analytics events constants in your app, you can definitely like piggyback on these existing events. And so we take the event and we call donate on it when there is no associated donation value. And then so here you listen, and you can also say donated within a week. Oh, okay, so you can say, okay, I want to display the tip, but only if the user has tapped on this button at least 3 times during the current week or the current day. That's very interesting and very powerful. To draw attention to features, honestly, I think I'm gonna find use cases for this. So let's see. I'm gonna do favorite landmark tip dot did view landmark dot donate, like that. Just, I think I'm gonna want to rename this because it should be the same name than here. So for that, right click, refactor, rename. It's so nice when your project is so small that rename works like almost immediately. And so now let's see. I'm gonna relaunch the app. And so when I click 4 times on the button, it should display the tip. So let's see. Clicked once, click twice, click 3 times. Perfect. Amazing. So that's quite powerful indeed. That's quite powerful indeed. So let's see what other options we have inside the rule. If I go back on this $0, so on $0, what do we have? So actually we have the event. We get this event right here. And so if we look at the donations, then basically we can do some form of querying. And so like when they did the donated within, we can say day, hour, minutes, week, or also like days with like if you want to say in the last 3 days, for instance. So that can be like can be quite interesting. Yeah, it's very powerful feature. They really did a great job. Like I'm doing just like donated within like minutes, and then like greater than 3. And so I'm gonna relaunch the app and I'm gonna try. Oh wait, I need to do the count then. Okay. So I'm going to click 1, 2, 3, and then I need to wait 1 minute, which is going to allow us to take a pause, I guess. Also, I don't have a timer, so it's gonna be a bit weird. I'm not sure it will work, that I will count a minute like correctly. Maybe there had been like a seconds and you can say, okay, like 10 seconds, it would have been like better. Does it exist? No, the smallest one you have is minutes, the smallest unit that you have. But at least it's pretty cool. And while the minute elapses, we can take a look. They were saying that you can also have an associated donation value. So they still create the event, but you can see there is this generic argument, which is like an argument. And so you can donate with a value, which here, for instance, is the ID and name of a landmark. And then this way you can say, oh, okay, if there is a property on this donation associated value that is satisfied, then you should display the tip. So it adds like this additional like filter that you can do here. So you could say, I don't know, for instance, like maybe you have like different kind of tools and or different kinds of features, and you want to draw attention to them like differently. Maybe some of them you want to draw attention to them like regularly, other like less often or more often. So that can be interesting. And I will also want to have a look at the version where you do things like with just like state, direct state. So for that, I will need to go back at the rule, but you could have also like, you know, a global variable binding and do things depending on this binding. But let's see. So now if I click again, yeah, you can see like nothing happened because it had been more than a minute. But now if I click a bit more, it's appearing again. And what's interesting is that if I keep clicking, then it's because its count is greater than 3. But you know what? Now I want to check with like with a modulo operation. So I'm just gonna keep the count, but instead of greater than 3, I'm gonna say is multiple of 3. Let's see what happens. Oh, it seems you cannot do is multiple of. Okay, because since we are in I think it's a predicate, so it's just like with Swift data, like you're not allowed to do everything that you want actually inside of here. And so, for instance, you cannot call the method is multiple of. In a predicate, you can only call some specific methods. But maybe, can we do like modulo like that? Something like that. You need to really like you need to do a comparison on count. Okay, so you cannot say like I wanted to say, you know, like every third time I want to do it. I'm sure you could do it like in a different way, but you need to have a comparison on the count. Okay, because it's a macro, so the macro is given like this source code, and then it must do something with the source code. Okay, you know what? Let me go back to the documentation, and I want to see the documentation for the rule. So where I was just before. Okay, it was just above actually. And you see there was this version where you have some state. So let's see. I need to go back to Xcode. So we're adding another piece of state right here. We have this add parameter, which seems to be, so it's a macro. It's not a property wrapper. You can see that the color is different than on the one Xcode would use for a property wrapper. Let's see if we can expand the macro, because normally macros, there is a way to expand to see the code that they generate. But I don't find it. I don't remember like where you get the feature, but normally there is this feature to expand. Yes, here we have expand macro. Oh, we can see. Okay, so you can see this is how like this code gets translated. That's super interesting. Oh, that's so cool. So you can see actually it builds a rule. So this part here is still the same, and then this simple closure that we passed, I mean, we saw that it was not like a regular closure in the sense that we couldn't do write arbitrary code inside of it. So it's all turned into something that uses a key path. So it builds a predicate by saying, okay, it's a comparison. The left-hand side is going to be like you take like you take like a root and then you call donations on it, then count, and then for the right hand side you take just like the constant free and you wrap it into some kind of type, and then for the operation it's greater than. So it's super cool for me to see this, because like the first piece of open source Swift I did was a framework called KeePathKit, which was doing basically like this thing but in a much more simpler way. But it's super cool to see that the way they've implemented it is kind of similar to what I had done, at least in the very big picture. What I had done like 6 years ago. I think it was it was in 2017, so already 6 years 6 years ago. So it's super cool to be able to see this. You know what? I'm even gonna make like a screenshot of it, because I think I might want to like tweet about it at some point, because it's super interesting. And so what I did was right click, expand macro, and let's see if we have the same option for the parameter here. Yes. Okay. So what it does is that it creates some underlying like this like underlying variable, and then a getter and a setter. What's interesting is that this shows you that you can create like this kind of macros for your own needs. Like for instance, in SwiftUI for environment keys or preference keys. One of my colleagues at work did it for environment keys, and it works super well. And it's a bit of work to implement, but it's not like a crazy amount of work, and it's super useful. Okay, so now that we have this, so it's called user is logged in. So I'm going to change the rule here, and instead, let me go back to documentation. So, okay, so I want to create a new rule actually. All right, so I'm gonna comment out the entire, no, didn't meant to do that. Like that. Okay, no, only these 3 lines, all right. And so now I'm gonna create a new rule. So this time it's going to be dollar is, I mean, it's going to be this thing. I'm not sure if I should use a dollar or not actually. You know what? Let me go back to the doc. Yes, I'm supposed to use the dollar, and then in the closure, I would say like $0 equal true. Let's see. It cannot access it because I guess I need to do self like that. And also I need to not make a typo. I mean, that's gonna be better. That's gonna be much better than me trying to type from memory. But so, okay, I need to use like the capital S self. Okay, build succeeded. And so for now, this is false. But if here, instead of donating the event, I do so favorite landmark tip dot user logged in dot so this time I don't want the dollar, I just want it like that, and I do dot toggle. So if it's false, I set it to true. If it's true, set it to false. Let's see what this does. So you can see, and now it's appearing every time that you click. Oh, now it stopped appearing. Ah, it's because I think it's because I explicitly closed it. Let's see. Yes, so first it was appearing because the boolean went to true, then it stopped because the boolean went to false, then back to true, then to false, then back to true, then to false. But as soon as I explicitly dismiss it, then you can see that it no longer appears during the entire session of my app. And if I didn't set this should reset true, then it will never appear again. So once again, kind of a powerful feature. And what's interesting now is that if we try to combine both rules, so like that, I'm gonna combine both rules. I'm going to create 2 buttons. So I will have a second button, and so this one will be called log. No, this one, the title, it will be, so it's gonna be like favorite landmark tip dot user is logged in, and it's gonna be either like login or log out. Okay. And then, so here I'm gonna toggle the boolean, and here I'm just gonna like trigger the event. Okay. So the app builds, perfect. And now I have put like both rules, and I'm wondering if there is an and or a or between the two rules. So for that, I'm gonna go back to the doc. Let's see. They only show one rule, and so I guess it's more like on the tip that I create my rules like that. Use this property to define the rules for when your tip displays. If you don't supply a value, this property returns an empty array of type rule. Okay, so they don't say if it's an and or if it's a or, and a rule builder. You can also put an if inside of it. So you could say like, if this is true, I want this rule, else I want this other rule. Okay, so let's see actually what's gonna happen. So if it's not gonna be hard. If it's a and, then I will need to have logged in set to true and at least 3 times donated the event. And other case will be either. So at first I'm going to try and like just like log in and see what happens. If when I click this button, it shows the tip, it's a or. Okay. What's interesting is that the title didn't change. But it's because it's not meant. I mean, it's not. So, it doesn't like refresh the state of the view. This add parameter. I don't know if I can also make it like because it no longer uses like the old way to observe like views, and I'm not that familiar with the new observation framework they've implemented in iOS 17. So let's see. You know what? I'm gonna do it in a way that is probably like not the best, but I will do var user logged in. So it will start with false. I will be changing. I'm gonna give it the same name. So I will be changing this one here. So at least like this way, it should. Do I still need to use like $? No. Cannot use mutating. How do you say that when you have like observable state now? Like, do you still say like at state? I'm so not sure how you do it with the new observation framework. If you know, like in the chat, please let me know. Because I know that there used to be like at state, at binding, all of these things, and now they changed it. But I'm not. I think now we use at state for everything, but I'm not sure actually. But first, let's see. Okay, so it does change the text of the button. That's great. And now what I'm gonna say like on change of user is logged in. So I will get like the old value and the new value. That's interesting. Are there like other like and then there is just like this one perform. Okay. I'm gonna take the one it's suggested. I will care only about the new value, and I will say, okay, favorite landmark user is logged in equal new value. Not the best code once again, but it should do the job. So we can see that by itself, setting like one of the two parts of the rule doesn't make the tip show. So it seems to suggest that we are dealing with an and between the two rules. And so if I'm logged in and that I click more than 3 times, then it gets displayed. And you can see that it's indeed an and between the two rules. And if you want to have a or, then I guess you need to implement it like a bit differently. Or you could also have like 2 different tips also. That's a way to build the or. Like you just create 2 different tips, and each of these tips take each of the operands of the or as their rules. Okay, so that's quite interesting, quite powerful, especially this thing here, because you can imagine, for instance, that you might want, I don't know, like I was taking the example of you have an app where you can export content that you created in the app. You have the basic export, but you also have advanced export. And so what you might want is, after the user has exported maybe like 3 times in a week, you want to highlight that there exists some advanced export. But if the user has used the advanced export before, you don't want to like point it out, because the user is already aware. And so you could be able to create this kind of rules where you would say, okay, if has exported 3 times and has never done an advanced export before, and you can start to see that you can build some pretty powerful things. It's gonna be very interesting, like talking about this feature with either product people or people that also focus on app growth. So that try to make sure that people are indeed discovering the features and using them as much as they would like to, because sometimes people are just not aware of a new feature inside an app. That's gonna be pretty exciting to tell them about this. And so let's see what else we can do in the Swift UI world, at least. So here it's something, yeah, it's basically what we did, but analytics engine. That's interesting. What's this thing? I would love to see what it's about. So tip dot set shared configuration. Let's see that. Tips dot set wait. Tips dot set shared. You know what? I'm just going to copy and paste this code. I love it when the code snippets from Apple doesn't work. So tip has no member set shared configuration. So maybe actually, maybe they've like changed it. Maybe they've changed it since they wrote the code, because it seems, you see, like this seems to correspond to this right here. So maybe actually I can just create an analytics engine. You know what? Let's go see like where these things are declared. So it's a tip configuration. Like I'm just realizing now that I didn't check any of the WWDC videos about TipKit. I'm sure there are some of them. I didn't check any before the live stream. Maybe I should have, but when I see that the code that they have in the documentation no longer works, I'm like, actually, like it's like lowers my level of guilt of doing this live stream with absolutely like zero preparation and discovering everything live. So let's see. So we have display frequency, data store location. Okay, so we are just below actually the AnyTip, which seems to be like a type-erased wrapper for tip. Okay. Yeah, it seems we have only like these two things. And is there any mention of this like analytics engine? No. So I guess this will stay like a bit of a mystery. I'm just gonna look at the tips. What's weird is that it's still in the documentation and it's not marked as like as removed or deprecated. So it's so weird that I cannot access it. Just gonna try it. I'm gonna try to go and see like what's inside tips. So if I go like here and command click, so okay, so it's just a namespace, it's an empty enum. So we have a bunch of declarations. Okay. Trying to find the static methods actually. Yeah, it's interesting. Max display count. I saw this. Specifies the maximum number of time a tip display before the system automatically invalidates. So you could say like this one, it should have a max display count of like 1 or 2 or 3. That's interesting. Okay, so that's the method we called configure. Okay. Default configuration. And so where is this method? Oh, we have the show all tips. Also, we will try to call it with a dispatch async after to see what it does. We can see like when a tip is invalidated because user called it, okay, closed it. It seems like this set, yeah, it seems like this set configuration is no longer present. Okay, so what did I want to do? Yes, I wanted to do something like, so create a task. Inside this task, do task.sleep for, and then I'm gonna give it like 3 seconds, for instance. So it's gonna be like try a wait, I would say. Okay. And then I'm gonna say tips dot show all tips. Let's see what's gonna happen. So 1, 2, 3. It didn't show all tips. Let's see. I'm gonna put a breakpoint just to make sure that the code is actually triggered. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it's been triggered. Okay, gonna resume. It didn't show all tips. So show all tips regardless of their display rule eligibility. So why didn't it work? Or you can just say show tips with an array of types. So I could say also, for instance, show tips, and then in the array, I could say like favorite landmark tip.self. You're saying it's only for tests, so maybe it only works when your app is running inside your UI tests, maybe. Because by test, I understood like it's for developers to test and like please don't use it in production. But maybe you're right, and there is even more like restrictions on it. Okay, so I didn't watch the video, so you know more about it than I do. So I'm gonna try to find it just if I can see what they say. Okay, so show all tips. Okay, for UI testing of tips. Okay, so indeed, you had the right explanation. Thank you, Gustavo. Okay, so I will stop wasting time on this and just remove it. What if we try to see how this works in the UI kit world? I'm wondering like if I should create either a new app or just a new view, and then I think I can just create like a new view. Let's try and do it. I'm gonna structure this a bit. Like I'm gonna have the Swift UI view. So I'm gonna create a Swift UI view, and I will call it, for lack of inspiration, Swift UI view. Okay. And all of these things right here. So these things, I'm gonna move them into a Swift UI view. Like that. I also need to move this state, like this state right here into the Swift UI view. Like that. Okay. And of course, use the Swift UI view here. You can see that I still call the task on the Swift UI view because the task, this seems to be like a configuration you do only once. You do it either in your app if you're in Swift UI, or in your like app delegate or scene delegate if you are in UI kit. So it makes sense for this to be called only once and to be called so like at the app level, because actually what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna put my Swift UI view into a tab view like this. So I will give it like a tab item, and it will just be like a text, and I will call it like a Swift UI. And then I will have like a second thing, which will be my UI kit view. And how can I do UI kit? You know what? I'm gonna do it very simple. I'm just gonna wrap a UI label to work in Swift UI. So I will call it UI label plus Swift UI, something like that. So here I'm gonna be importing both Swift UI and UIKit, okay? And so it's gonna be, how do I call it? I'm gonna call it like UI label underscore Swift UI. The naming is awful, but at least you all understand what it does. So UI view representable. And how do I set this? So I'm gonna have to want to store like some kind of text. But first, let's say, okay, so it's gonna be a UI label like that. Okay, can get rid of this now. And so here I'm gonna have let text. The text is gonna be like a string, something like that. And so make UI view, I'm just going to return a UI label. And here is gonna be, actually, you know what? Let me rename it in UI label. And so I will say UI label dot text equal text, something like that. And now for the second part in my tab view, the second view, it will be my UI label Swift UI with a text that will be like hello world. Let's be super original. And I'm gonna need to give it a tab item, which will be UI kit. Okay, that was a bit of heavy lifting. Let's see if my code worked or if I just like miserably failed to implement something simple. Okay, if I could just center it because it's a little bit to the side and it's not the best looking code you can do. I think I should be able to do it like, so here I'm gonna have my UI label, store it into a local variable, return it, and say, okay, UI label dot text alignment. But I'm not sure if center works when you have only like, when you have only, oh, even if you're one line, it works. Okay, because it takes all of the space. Okay. Okay, great. So now we are in the UI kit world, and on this UI label, we can try and add a tip to it. So how can we do that? Let's try and see if the documentation can help us. Let's see. It was called tip UI view, I think, this one. Okay, oh, perfect. We even have a code example, that's amazing. So use this view to create a tip you want to display and lay out as a UI view. To configure the content and appearance of your view, use the init arrowEdge action handler function and provide a tip along with an optional arrowEdge and optional action. Set the background color of your tip view using background color. Adding, so very similar to what we did in SwiftUI. Adding and removing tip UI view from your app is done by listening to a tips should display updates or tip status updates. Okay, so here we have a UI view controller. So inside of it, there is the tip. And so we say, oh, so you listen. Oh, it's interesting to see Apple using the async sequence syntax. However, when I see this code, no, I was like, does this create like a memory leak? No, because this, I guess this should like, this sequence should finish at some point. But here, like we are capturing, we are using capturing the view. So honestly, I'm not sure that this code doesn't create any doesn't create like a memory leak. But let's see. So I need to have a view did appear. Okay, so maybe actually like when I did my UI label thing, I just went in the wrong direction. But the thing is that in this view controller, they don't do like you need to at least display like one thing. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna take this code. I'm gonna just copy and paste it because I'm gonna trust the documentation. So they said that this was called, how did they say it was called? Cat tracks view controller. So we're gonna create it. cat tracks view controller like that. Just gonna paste the code. Okay. Let's see. First, will this build? No, because this stuff doesn't exist. But I'm gonna use like my favorite landmark tip instead. Okay. And just gonna rename this to favorite landmark tip. I love how the naming is all over the place in this live stream. Like when I do like the training course, I try to have like everything be rigorous, but here it's like all over the place. Okay, and it's gonna be, sorry, but I prefer the code to be this way. Does it build? Yes, that's good. So now we're gonna need to just have maybe like a UI label. So I'm gonna do something like this. And then I would like to display it. So if I do like, I don't know, like view, add subview, like label, because it's auto-resizing, like the property, like should translate, translate auto-resizing mask into constraint is set to true by default. And for once, that's what I kind of want. So let's see. And for the label, let's just say that it will say equal hello world. When I see myself writing like all this code in the view appear of a view controller, I feel like we are back, 10 years ago when no one really knew how to make a good architecture of an iOS app, and everything was in these massive view controllers. I feel I'm back like 10 years ago doing Objective-C in 2012, basically during my first internships. Okay. So this stuff actually, now I was about to say is gonna go, you know what? This thing, I'm just going to call it view controller because this name, the cat track, has nothing to do with the rest. So just going to call it view controller. And then here is gonna be like view controller plus SwiftUI. Here, view controller plus SwiftUI. We're gonna use UI view controller representable. This is going to go. It's gonna be this type, view controller here. So let's just here return a view controller like that. And here we have nothing to do actually. And in my app now I can just say, okay, I want to have my view controller SwiftUI. Build failed because it's not make UI view, it's make UI view controller and update UI view controller. Build succeeded. Perfect. Let's launch the app for now just to see, like, because we have nothing being displayed. So I think I need to fix this issue. I think I tried to go too fast and I made a mistake. You know what? I'm gonna do it like I do it usually. So it's gonna be like lazy var label, which is gonna be a UI label, a closure that I call immediately. So I say let's label equal UI label like that. Label.translate equal false because I will set explicit constraints later, something like that, and then return the label. Okay, let's format this code, please. All right, I will keep this line right here, but once it's been added as a subview, then I will say ns layout constraint dot activate. And so here, you know what, I will just go something simple. Label.centerXanchor.constraint equal to view.centerXanchor, and then do the same thing for center Y. Let's see, will this work? Okay, perfect. So now we can add like the tip view, the tip UI view as a subview maybe of. I would like it to point to this hello world actually. Okay, let's see. And so here we say should display update. If should display, then we add it as a subview. What if I add it as a subview of like the label instead? Let's see. Now the thing is that I don't have a button to trigger it. So you know what? I'm just gonna trigger it from here. And so here, if I switch, okay, you can see it's appearing, but it's appearing like out of nowhere. So let's see. Maybe if I put it back to view, what does it do? So once again, I want it to appear. Okay, so it's appearing at the top. Let's see if they have some advice for this in documentation. Here they just like add it as a sub view, but that's like far from great. Let's see if there is the equivalent of the modifier in SwiftUI, for instance. If I say view dot, no, there is nothing to because like being able to display the tip at the right place in the UI, that's one of the two like killer features of TipKit. There is the rule system, but there is also the fact that you can just say, okay, pop over tip, and it just works. So I'm trying to see. Really seems like there is nothing special. Just gonna go back to the doc because there is of course the version for AppKit, and I would love to see. You see tip ns popover. Maybe this is what I would use actually. Maybe I want to use tip UI popover actually, rather than just the tip UI view. Okay, and then you do present. That seems more interesting. That seems much more interesting. So let's see. Now we have this button. What's funny is that they don't use the button anywhere. Oh, the source item. Okay. That seems much more promising. So let's go back here. And all right. Gonna hide the left part so that we can see everything. So the landmark tip is here. Let me just... Oh, wait. There is a shortcut in Xcode 15 for that. I think it's like... where is it? I think it's in format. No. Refactor. No. Because they moved it, but you can like reformat a call. Where is it? No. There was this feature and then they moved it. Oh, that sucks. But there was a feature they had added where you could like generate like basically it would do this where you put the arguments each on their own line, and I can't find it anymore, but they had moved it. They had put it in a refactor first and then moved it, but maybe it's also because the code doesn't build. So you know what? I'm just gonna fix the code first. So I'll put like the label as the source item. Does the code build? Animated true. Okay, it builds. So now if I look at this call here, or maybe it's in edit format. No, this is more about like formatting text. Editor maybe. Selection. Split selection by line. No, at least it didn't work. Okay, I'm gonna drop it because that's not the topic of this live stream. But now it should display using a popover. So let's see. So first we enable it. Okay, it's enabled. And if we switch, okay, now it's displayed as a popover, and now it's much more useful. So what's great is that we can see the API is kind of similar. Still easier in SwiftUI because you just add the modifier popover tip, and then SwiftUI takes care of everything. In UIKit, there's a bit more work that you need to do because you need to first listen to the change in the model that decides whether a tip should be displayed or not. So you do it by creating a task in the in Vue did appear, for instance. And then you can use this tip UI popover view controller, and you present it by giving it a source item, so where the arrow should point to. So a bit more code to write, but still I would say like given how complex this feature of showing like tooltips can be, I'd say it's still like a pretty good job that they did. And the big advantage is that since it's a first party framework, if tomorrow there is a new device with a new form factor, you have the kind of the guarantee that it should work with this new like device. I imagine also that TipKit is gonna work pretty well on Vision OS. And I'm not sure that all of the third-party tooltips framework are going to look that great when the app that they are used into is displayed on Vision OS. So honestly, pretty cool. Pretty cool framework. I see it's been like an hour and a half, and I think like for like an exploration and discovering, it's pretty nice. I'm gonna go back to the docs to see if there are other things we could explore, but I'm glad with what we've seen like in this live stream, because personally I'm satisfied with what I've seen. Like now I understand better how to use TipKit, both in SwiftUI and UIKit. I understand better when the tips are being triggered and all the options that you have to control when they should be triggered. So it gives me an idea of how powerful the framework, the TipKit framework is, and how it can be used inside a real world app. So I'm very happy with what I've learned. And so I'm just looking. So data store location. So it's just like where the data is stored. There is this idea of a group identifier. So maybe you could even put it in a group container. So like, you know, if you have several apps that work together, you could like mutualize the source of truth for whether a tip should be displayed or not. It's kind of a niche, use case, but it might make sense. And then let's see, display frequency. So this one we saw it. We used immediate, so the system show the tips with no limitation on frequency. But if it's hourly, it will show no more than 1 tip per hour. So it's interesting because it seems to be more like it seems to be like at across all tips. So like it will show only 1 tip every hour. That can be interesting because by setting this, if you put it like on a daily, for instance, even if you have like lots of tips that you can show, you have the guarantee that you won't be showing more than 1 tip per day. That's a good way to not overwhelm the user, and it seems to be just a global configuration. It's pretty easy to set up. So that's pretty cool. And maybe that's also why the group identifier could be useful, because indeed, if you have several apps that work together, you might not want to overwhelm your user, and maybe you're like, okay, 1 tip across all of the apps every day, for instance, is more than enough. So that's pretty cool. Ignore. Okay, you can override this. Apparently, you can override this frequency. That's pretty interesting, because you might have indeed like a tip that is like behaving, you know, like a bit differently, and it's kind of like, you know, the exclamation mark important in CSS, where like you play the rule of the cascading mechanism, but sometimes you want to opt out from it. You don't want to do it too often, but it's nice that you have the possibility to be able to do it. Okay, you might want for a tip like to not display more than a certain amount of time. So the should display, we saw that it's what we were observing. So if I go back to the UIKit code, we were observing should display updates, which was just letting us know whenever should display had changed. So that's where we get the result of whether the tip should be displayed or not. And so it's important to understand that TipKit, there are 2 parts. There is the data model, which is the tip, and the rules that govern whether or not you should display a tip. And then there is whether there is the UI to display the tip. And so when you're in SwiftUI, it's kind of done for you, because you just put a tip view, or you use pop over tip, the modifier. But in UIKit, you need to do a bit more work in UIKit. You need to explicitly listen for changes in the model and then display the tip yourself. Okay, so status update, yes, that's the async stream we were listening to. Invalidate. So if you want to permanently invalidate the tip and prevent it from displaying, once again, might be useful like to have like I don't know, like maybe you would like to have like in your settings in your app a switch to deactivate all the tips or to opt out because like some users they are just being like pissed off by the tips. So when you have a tutorial, it's kind of nice to also allow user to skip it. Here it's kind of the same reason. Okay, you can know why it was invalidated. So I think they were saying it can be either like the user performed the action the tip describes, the tip exceeded its maximum display count, or it was closed by the user while it was displaying. Oh, we didn't look at the actions. Let's do that. Let's do that before we finish. Let's take a look at the actions we can have inside the tip. So I've learned from my mistake. This time I will look inside the doc first because you don't want to like try to figure out how to write the code. We saw with the rules it was a bit difficult. So use actions to provide additional help and guidance for people looking to get started with your tip. Actions appear at the bottom of your tip view in the form of buttons. You can create an action providing an ID and a title. The ID is a string that uniquely identifies the action. The title is text that displays as a label on the button. Okay. So apparently the actions, they're not on the tip itself. It seems that they are on the view that presents the tip. So let's just see. If I go back to the tip, we can see that we have the rules, we have the option. Oh, you can also have the action at the level of the tip. So maybe you can just give them at the level of the tip, but also if you want, give them at inside the view. I would love to see because here it's tips.action, but maybe there is. Oh, I can filter. I just need to type correctly. Okay, so it's when you want to provide actions to a tip. If you don't supply a value, it's just an empty array. Okay. And then when you create a tip view, you can provide actions to it. So it seems indeed that you can do it in two places. Tip UI view, same thing, and tip UI popover. Okay. Okay, so you know what? Let's try and do this action thing. So let's try and first, I don't know, like do it in Swift UI. So is it like an extra argument on this modifier? Yes, action. What's interesting is that it seems that action, it takes the action as an argument. So it's more like I guess maybe it's like in the tip you say, okay, there is this action possible, and then you're being told, okay, this action was triggered by the user. Maybe it works like that. So you know what? Let's try and implement the actions here. And so what is an action? So there is ID, and basically you just need a title. So like do something, basically. You know what? I'm just gonna run this code and see what is gonna change. So okay, we have do something here, so I can click it. But for now, it does nothing. And I guess here I need now to take it into account. So I will get my action here. And so in the action, so there is the ID. And so I'm gonna say like if the ID is equal, so please don't do this, of course, like create constants, do things better. But if action, okay, and then what do? I guess I need to do something because also maybe I would like to close the tip. So maybe I would like to do like favorite landmark tip dot invalidate with reason like user performed action. Even though here I'm doing it manually, but I guess it would be done automatically when the action has been performed. Let's see. Or maybe on the action I can say like it's been performed. No. But I'm sure that there is a way to do it without explicitly like invalidating the tip, but at least like here, no, didn't even do it. Is it like, I want to set a breakpoint like here, see if, no, I want to put the breakpoint here on line 23, on the line where there is the if statement. So let's see. Okay, so I'm going in here. Let's have a look. So action is here. ID. What's ID? I'm printing the description of ID. Or just like okay, so it's index 0. Oh yes, I'm so stupid because here I set the title but not the ID. So here the ID will be like my action. Okay, so definitely don't do things like I do in a real app. This is just like a demo code. So let's see. Okay, at least it behaved as we like expected, but I would love to see if there is a way to say like just action accomplished, and then it takes care of doing the invalidation. Tipkit takes care of the invalidation. Let me go back to the documentation. Yes, but user performed action, that's what I used. So action builder, yeah, but we've just used it. What I would love to see is on maybe on tip on popover tip. You know what? Let me search for popover. Where is it? I think it was like popover tip, like that. Yes, this one. But of course, yeah, there is no example. So I guess you need to manually invalidate, but I would just love to find something in the code to let me know if there is something better. Like here for the actions, there is no example of because it returns void, so it's not like if I could return a boolean to say like, okay, action was executed. In a way, it makes sense that by default, like clicking on the action doesn't invalidate the tip because it might just be something that you would like the user to do like again. So it kind of makes sense. And here, if I go into the action, okay, it can be a disabled action. Perform handler. So you could give a handler to say when the action happens, do this thing. So you know what? Let's try and create it. So just go back to I mean, I'm already in Xcode. So in my tip, so here I'm gonna create like this. So what was it? Was perform like that, and so I'm just gonna say like print action performed just to see what happens. So do we see like action performed? Action, no, just per. I'm not used to this new like console that does things a bit differently. I would just, because you know what, I'm just gonna put like a breakpoint just to see like because maybe just I need to call something for this action to be performed, and I want to see if the perform handler is executed. So let's see. No, it's just not executed. Okay. So let's just have a look what they say about the perform handler. Okay, the function the system calls when the action triggers. Okay, so why isn't it executed? So action, if I look here at the perform handler, let's see. I'm just, you know what, I'm gonna remove the if because here it's not super useful anyway. And I'm gonna comment out this code just to see if when it's commented out, maybe then the print is triggered. No. But we can see something is happening because there is an event being sent. And so maybe I should, like on the action, what can I do for the action to be executed? Maybe it's more at this level. Because here there is the actions, but what can you do on an action? Yeah, you can't even call like the perform. How do I call this perform method? Oh, I didn't meant to do that. Just wanted to minimize it because I want to search here for perform. The user performed the action. So there is this thing here. Oh, this is what I've used actually. I'm a bit stuck. I'm gonna see if I can solve this. If I can't, it's not too bad. Like we've still seen like a good amount of cool stuff this evening. But I haven't triggered the option. That's what annoys me a bit. And maybe if I go like on a tip. No, we don't have any sample code. So here we are back on where we started. Maybe it's something we should call maybe on tip and saying tip perform action, for instance, or on tips. Let's see what we have on tips. No, we just have reset. This method that actually doesn't seem to exist, but there is nothing to Oh, they say, oh, you can set the action parameters. So maybe that's why. Maybe like the two of them are mutually exclusive and you can only do one or the other. And if you set like an action handler in the view, then it overrides whatever you had set in the model. That would make sense in a way. So you know what? I'm gonna remove this code and let's see if now we enter the breakpoint. Let's see. No. I'm so sad. I really thought that this was going to be what I was looking for, but no. Okay, and yeah, there was no like action performed printed to the console. I'm looking to see like if there is action performed. No. Okay, that sucks. That sucks a bit. It always sucks to end up like on something that you couldn't figure out. But I mean, it was the same thing with the Swift Data live stream. And when you're trying to explore and discover a new framework live with limited documentation, it's always like one of the risks. In hindsight, maybe next time I will watch the WWC video before making this kind of live because I feel like it could have like helped me a bit along the way. But I'm still happy, like I was saying, with this live because in what like 1 hour and 40 minutes, we've covered like quite a bit of ground. I think we're aware now of the power of TipKit and the kind of use cases where it could be used. So best advice I could give you is let your product manager, your app growth colleagues know about this feature because they might want to use it. And what's great is that since TipKit, it's kind of a nice to have in a way. So even though it's iOS 17, you can still in a way use it because for this kind of feature, maybe if not all users, if users that are still on iOS 16 don't benefit from the tooltips, maybe you can still live with it. So that's kind of nice because usually new features we need to wait a few years before we can actually start using them. Just before we need to because we need to support like older versions of iOS. But this one is a bit like a bit different, and it's kind of nice. But at least like for myself, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how we will be able to use TipKit at work because I think there is definitely like some potential, and I would say definitely like start with something simple. Like don't try to put TipKit on every part of your app. Just start with something simple and then build up from that in terms of complexity. Whether it's complexity in adding like more tips or dealing with more complex rules, you definitely want to do it like one step at a time. Finally, to finish, as always, big thank you to people who gave remarks, asked questions in the chat. It's always great because it makes the live stream very interactive, and also when discovering and exploring, having like a different opinion to help me when I'm stuck is always a great experience. I think that's the end for this exploration of TipKit. If you would like me to explore and discover other new frameworks, please let me know in the comments. I would love to do more live streams like this, and I will probably do more live stream like this once I have figured out on which topic I could focus. But I guess I just have to say thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.